All right, we're back. Sorry about that, everyone. Good evening and welcome to this virtual town hall hosted by your 28th District legislators. Tonight, you will be seeing and hearing from Senator Twina Nobles and Representatives Mari Leavitt and Dan Bronoske. Some of you have submitted questions in advance, and I will read those questions to your lawmakers. You may also submit your questions live via the chat box in whatever social media platform you're watching from. So please submit your questions now or anytime during this event, and we will answer as many questions as we can. Before we begin answering your questions, I'd like to open it up to our lawmakers for some brief opening remarks. First, we'll hear from Senator Twina Nobles. Senator Nobles is the president and CEO of the Tacoma Urban League. She's a University Place school board member and a former public school educator. Senator Nobles moved to the district 2 decades ago as a part of a military family and has been honored to serve the community ever since. Senator Nobles now serves as vice chair of the Early Learning and K-12 Education and Higher Education Workforce Development Committees. She is also a member of the Transportation Committee and the Behavioral Health Subcommittee. Senator Nobles, take it away.
Thank you, and good evening to all of our guests. This has been a very productive session. I'm so excited you're able to join us for our final town hall of the year. And we have so many updates. If you've been following, I worked on 7 bills this session and passed 5 of them. The final one, my police accountability bill, was passed just today. But I just want to welcome you and thank you for your support, your calls, your emails, your testimonies. Thank you for caring deeply about our community and the future of Washington State. And I look forward to hearing your questions this evening, and I will pass it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we'll hear from Representative Mari Leavitt to share a few opening words. Representative Leavitt is a mom, a small business owner, a PTSA leader, and former deputy director of the Pierce County Human Services Department. She currently serves as vice chair of the College and Workforce Development Committee, and she's a member of the Capital Budget and Housing, Human Services, and Veterans Committees. Representative Leavitt.
Thank you, and welcome everyone tonight. Thanks for joining us and taking time away from your families. And also thank you to our staff who are here to assist us, both that you're hearing from and those in the background and behind the scenes to make sure that we get your questions answered. It's great to be with you. This was a historic session, and I know many of you have heard that word historic over and over and over again, but I don't think it can be understated in the kind and the nature in which we had our virtual session. And I'm really proud that in our legislature, not one staff member, not one legislative colleague, or anyone associated with our legislative process got COVID, unlike Idaho and Oregon. So from that perspective, very proud of the work that we did. Look forward to answering your questions. And when we started, we focused on 4 areas, and you'll hear those tonight. And those were addressing COVID, economic recovery, racial justice, and climate change. And look forward to answering your questions. Great to be with all of you.
Thank you, Representative Leavitt. Now we'll hear from Representative Dan Bronoske. Representative Bronoske is a lifelong Pierce County resident and has served for 6 years in the Washington Army National Guard. He's a 20-year local firefighter who has been on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. Representative Bronoske is vice chair of the Transportation Committee in the House and serves on the Healthcare and Wellness and Labor and Workforce Standards Committee. Representative Bronoske.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to be here tonight. I must say that this session has been the highest honor for me to serve this district. And I've been a public servant my entire adult life. And to be able to work in Olympia, virtually, of course, and face the challenges that we're currently dealing with to help serve the people of the state of Washington and certainly serve our great legislative district was, like I said before, just the highest honor. I'm proud to have worked on some good legislation for our district that will provide better access and to mental health resources, which is desperately needed. And I'm also excited to have passed a bill that will allow for local community members who volunteer during emergencies or during medical emergencies like COVID have immunity protections. So they go out and serve the community with the confidence that they're going to have protections and that we're going to have their back. But it certainly wasn't all me. It was a team effort, and I couldn't have done it without you providing your input, taking the time to meet with me. It was extremely helpful. So thank you so much again for being here tonight. Thank you for your time and effort this session and to tell us what's important to you. Look forward to answering your questions tonight. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And everyone can hear me, right? All right. Oh, thank you. Well, we'll go ahead and begin taking questions. And we've got a bunch that were emailed in. And so I'll start off with one of those. But if you're listening or you're watching at home right now, please feel free to go ahead and ask your question in the chat wherever you're watching, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We will see those questions, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can. So our first question is, it's from Denise. Denise lives in University Place and said that students and families and also our teachers have had a really hard year. While we appreciate the work that everyone has done to make this a new normal, many people are still struggling. Denise wants to know, what education investments did you support this year, and how did you work with school districts this year? And I know Senator Nobles, I know that you're passionate about education. So if you'd like to start that one off, and then if anyone else would like to join in, we'd love to hear from your perspectives.
Thank you. That is a really great question. And I had the honor of serving this year on 2 education committees, early learning in K-12, as well as higher education and workforce development. And personally, I championed a couple of bills focused on education. One is foster care point of contact legislation, which will ensure that there is a point of contact at all of our schools across the state. We want to make sure that our community knows the names and the needs of our students who are experiencing foster care. And this is critically important to me because I experience foster care and know the importance of those points of contacts. I also worked on the College Bound bill, and now the College Bound scholarship will auto-enroll students who are eligible for the College Bound scholarship. Previously, at least 10,000 students never received this additional funding for their higher education because they never returned the pledge. And so the pledge requirement has been removed. We also worked on a number of bills, and I have a full list here, but we worked on bills that focus on supporting our school counselors. We worked on a number of bills to ensure that we are actively talking about the importance of equity on all levels of education and providing equity training to our educators. We made sure that we thought about our districts trying to move through this pandemic and support students, and also supported transportation funding for our school districts. We worked really hard on digital literacy, on broadband, on mastery-based education legislation, but there were lots of pieces of legislation focused on our students who are in our special education programs, all the way through focusing on making sure that we have products in our schools for our students who need menstrual products, and taking care of school lunch debt. So there was a broad range of legislation this session that focused on K-12, but also higher education.
And I'll jump in, and Senator Nobles gave a great listing of all of the efforts that we made. And so I won't duplicate and just add to her great comments that in addition, we did an emergency waiver very early on for graduation requirements, invested money in our private schools, and adjusted their requirements for instructional hours to make sure that their students in the private schools could also be made whole. We worked on early learning investments. So when we think of education, it's our littlest learners as well. And so there was significant early learning investments, both on the capital side and early learning facilities. and providing additional dollars for those providers who are investing in early learning facilities. But in addition, focusing on expanding early learning options through every K through 12 school district. Also focused on behavioral health, and Denise, you hit it the nail on the head in terms of how families are struggling, and in particular, our youth and our children are struggling with mental health challenges. And so invested in both behavioral health dollars for counselors, as Senator Nobles mentioned, but then also making sure that our youth have access to information on the school website, that they have suicide prevention information and behavioral health information so that they can take that and also direct their own education of how they might receive assistance. And so it was a pretty broad investment in education. It was a focus for all of us. I've got 3 kids who are in public schools right now, a 2nd, 3rd, and 9th grader. And so I know how hard it is for working parents. And so added childcare options as part of that for our working connections. But for early learning, that was a great investment in addition to all the great listing that Senator Nobles mentioned.
And I'll just add one thing. I'm really proud about our ability to stabilize the school transportation piece so that we retain school bus drivers in our districts. I went to the University Place School District bus facility, and they were very excited to show me, as a firefighter, not as a legislator, their brand new all electric school bus, which is going to be great to get our kids back to school and save money on diesel, save money on overall transportation costs with that one particular piece of equipment. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't have school bus drivers to drive that great electric school bus in the first place, our kids aren't going to be able to get to school. So in addition to everything my colleagues just said, we've done a lot of good work, but that was just something that I wanted to add a little tidbit as well. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and I'll just add one real quick thing for those who are parents or no parents in our districts. There was significant investment in learning loss programs that will begin this summer for children who feel that they need to do some catch up in addition to the fall. And so watch for information on those learning loss programs, because millions was invested in to assist our kids to make sure that they're caught up when fall starts.
Thank you. We have a question that has come in through the chat. And so I'm just going to encourage everyone, if you have a question for your lawmakers, please submit it in the chat that you have in front of you now. This question is from Joshua, who asks, why did the Worker Protection Act fail? And is it something that is a priority to you all moving forward to the next legislative session? And the Worker Protection Act, I believe this came from Representative Drew Hansen, and it went through the Labor Committee. And so Representative Bronoske, maybe you want to take that one, because I think maybe you were there at the hearing for that one.
Yeah, thanks, Joshua. And yes, this did come through our committee in the House, the Labor and Workplace Standards Committee, and it is a priority for us. And it's a piece of legislation that I know that we've been working on for a couple of years. It will protect working families to make sure that they have a safe working environment, that they are paid the amount of wages that they are owed, that they are paid the amount of overtime that they should have earned. And this is a mechanism that will allow those workers to go ahead and notify the state that, hey, something's wrong. I haven't been paid. My workplace is unsafe. Something needs to be done to fix this. So I am confident that we will continue to advocate for this particular piece of legislation where it is now. So it hasn't entirely failed. It is currently sitting in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. I am not knowledgeable as to why it didn't make it out of the committee and onto the Senate floor. But what I can tell you is that this is going to continue to be a priority for me and for us because it's a good bill that's going to be critical for worker protections, just like the bill says. Yeah, it's needed now just as much as it always has been, especially because of COVID. And it's a good piece of COVID recovery legislation too. So thanks for asking that, and continue to follow up in the interim, and we'll talk again next session too. Thanks, Joshua.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of more questions that have come in, and this one is one that I think a lot of working parents have had to deal with. This comes from Kenya, and Kenya asks, we saw the inequity of families with working parents, and particularly working mothers, I think in regards to COVID. Is there a plan for reducing the tough decisions of choosing between hands-on parenting and career advancement? And I think that there was maybe some legislation that might help with this year. So, Senator Nobles, maybe you want to start, and then if anyone else wants to chime in.
Sure. I mean, this definitely has been a real challenge. I mean, my children this year as well, just fighting through the pandemic, were home more than usual. And then we decided to stick with remote learning throughout the end of the school year. And I work a full-time job in addition to being a senator. But even before becoming a senator and before the pandemic, it has just been a really tough decision around not just childcare, but ways to support my children after school in the summer. And I'm really excited that this session, we did get to focus on many early learning bills, but in particular, I think we should highlight the Fair Start for Kids Act, which is providing a lot of additional resources for our families who are needing additional assistance with childcare. And that for me goes, up until later ages in elementary school, all the way down to our, infants and newborns. But we need to simply continue putting resources into the community. And this is just one bill that will help by making childcare and early learning more accessible for families, helping with the expense and affordability of childcare, especially for our community members who have copays. And so focusing on reducing copays so that childcare can become more accessible. And I love that Rep. Leavitt mentioned additional funds for summer learning loss, but also a lot of funds has gone into extended learning opportunities and out of school time initiatives across Pierce County. And that's the type of work that we want to continue to see, just strengthening the opportunity to provide those services for our families, because it simply is not fair to continue struggling with that battle. And it's not fair to provide a variety of services that no one can access because they're priced out. So this session, and I know in prior years, there's been a great emphasis on support for childcare, also support for childcare learning, licensing, quality childcare, access and affordability for childcare, and the Fair Start for Kids Act simply expands a lot of that work in a very unique way. So I look forward to seeing the implementation of that legislation and the relief of a burden to access and childcare for many of our families. And I do want to encourage folks. I know it is really difficult because I have 3 kids who are still home, and it is a challenge to figure out how to balance work and family. But I just want to encourage folks to hang in there and know that we are doing our part. And I, extend that work into what I do at Tacoma Urban League and in the community, just working really hard to provide opportunities for families who are working or who simply want additional resources for their children, who even when they're out of school. So we're going to continue working for trauma-informed care, professional care for our kids, and affordable care for our kids and families.
And I'll jump in, quickly answer Ms. Bridges' question on that her hope is that it will be provided to families at no cost. And that is the intention. Millions were infused for those learning loss programs to assist children who need it. And then in addition to what Senator Nobles talked about, the Fair Start for Kids Act, which is going to be transformational for families and for working parents and for our businesses who have been clamoring for quality childcare for their workers. We also invested in the Working Connections childcare program, which helps working parents not have that work burden that used to be placed on them to attend community and technical colleges and earn a degree or certificate or work on an apprenticeship program. And so that they have a safe place for their children and also can work on their own career advancement to take care of their families. So it was a highlight and a focus across the board this session, and very grateful and proud of the work we did in this area.
Great, thank you. We have another question that was emailed in, and then we have a bunch of questions that have been submitted. So I'm going to just power right through here. So our next question is from Sean, who I think said lives in Lakewood. Sean says that a lot of focus has been on renters who are struggling to stay in their homes during the pandemic. But landlords have lost out on a lot of income because of the eviction ban. What did the legislature do to help landlords keep their properties and get back the money that they lost? And I know that this has been a big issue in the legislature this year. So who would like to start off on that one? Because I know we did a lot.
Yeah, I can jump in. And I serve on the Housing Committee, Housing and Human Services Committee. We just renamed us this past session and have been since I joined the legislature. And Sean, you are correct. We've done a lot of work focusing on renters. And I want to assure you that we've also did a lot of work focusing on landlords and met with several landlord groups from the Multifamily Housing Association, the Landlords Association, and others to make sure that we crafted legislation that had landlords in mind as well, and equally. And so I'll give you some examples. We invested in landlord mitigation funds, significant investments in the landlord mitigation fund to help offset those landlords who need to pay their mortgages, because I'm very concerned that we'll lose housing stock if our landlords aren't taken care of. We invested in the Foreclosure Mortgage Act to make sure that those who are at risk on the forbearance space, we worked with banks, landlords, and other groups to provide assistance for our landlords. We made sure that we invested significantly in landlord direct assistance so that landlords can access assistance for their tenants and for their renters to get back pay, and 5160 gave up to $15,000 for landlords to be able to access. In addition, we invested $17 million in dispute resolution centers across in every part of our state to work with renters to help them apply for those renter assistance programs at the county or the local jurisdiction level, as well as through the Department of Commerce. So you are right, landlords are very important, a part of our housing solution. And we worked really hard with our landlords, hearing from them of how best to assist them on the really challenging times that we've all had in this past year.
And the beautiful thing about our role as legislators is we also do casework. And so in addition to the fabulous work that Rep. Leavitt mentioned, we simply connected landlords with some of our, mediation and legal groups in the community to help them to work with tenants so that they can collect rent or work out a payment plan. But the legislature definitely worked really hard this year to keep tenants housed and to keep landlords paid. And personally, because I am a renter, the one thing that I did was pay my rent so my landlord can have one less tenant to worry about, and her quest to make sure that she's taking care of her family and her properties. But I'm very proud of the work that our legislature did this session. And if folks are still looking for help with some of those disputes, some of the mediation, feel free to reach out to our offices and we can connect you with resources in the community.
Great, thank you. We have a question that came in over the chat. This is from Paul. Paul says, with the incredible amount of missions assigned to the Washington Air and Army National Guard this year, it's obvious that their ability to support a wide range of initiatives throughout the state will lead to their increased use in the future. Are there any considerations being given to incentive programs for Guard members, such as increased educational benefits, early retirement, or recruitment incentives? And I know a couple of you work on veteran and military service member issues. And Rep. Leavitt, I know that you actually are part of a group at the national level in this regard. So maybe you can start off and then folks can go from there.
Sure, I'll jump in. And I love our Guard so much. Our Washington National Guard members do significant work. I was able to see their work firsthand, delivering food for our residents in Lakewood, and they responded to COVID, and they responded at a national level, and they continue to respond each and every way that they're asked and are ready always. And so in the past few years, we have invested in our National Guard. We worked hard to make sure that they got a pay raise for the first time in 30 years. So when they're fighting wildfires, and I'm confident that they'll be called up again this summer, that they at least get pay parity to our state firefighters and are able to do that work. We invested in educational assistance in Washington for our Washington National Guard members last year, and we're continuing to expand that to make sure that we provide more educational assistance. There was a bill that, while it didn't get out this year, I'm confident that it'll get some positive reception next year. We just ran out of time, and that's to increase the age of our National Guard members to allow them to continue to work if they're willing and able, because we need all able-bodied National Guard members in Washington to who want to do and are willing to do the work to do that. But the pay increase incentive, the educational assistance that we offered and will continue to expand, assist in that. And we'll continue to find ways, working with our Washington Military Department and our Washington National Guard, to find out what they need to retain their great service members.
Yeah, and certainly, Paul, if you have any unique ideas, also send them my way. You know, I can just speak on my experience. When I enlisted back in 1997, we got $3,000, or at least I did, for my Montgomery GI Bill with the National Guard, and I spent it over at Bates Technical College, and it was gone in less than a year. And we've made substantial strides to make sure that we provide those kinds of incentives and educational benefits to retain those National Guard members, but we need to continue to improve, especially if we're going to continue to rely on members of the National Guard to provide more critical services. I mean, Representative Leavitt mentioned that, we've relied on them to respond domestically in an unprecedented way, not only to wildfires, but to COVID relief when it comes to delivering food. But something that I think we need to remember is, with the real challenges that we've had this year with the Employment Security Department getting people their unemployment benefits, we've had to activate the National Guard several times over the past year just to bring down the caseload numbers, and we're still working on it. And I understand that when we call up those National Guard members, especially junior enlisted folks, that the pay that they're earning while serving our state might not necessarily be on par with what they're earning as a civilian. So we want to continue to make sure that that we retain those critical members of our community. It's critical to national security. It's critical to the service of our state. And we want to do all that we can to incentivize you and your fellow National Guard members to stay. So if there are unique incentives that you can think of, continue to send them our way. And I know that advocates will do so. The military department does an excellent job of representing our National Guard members, but we can always do more. So thank you for the question, and continue to reach out on this. Thank you, John.
Great, thank you. We'll go to another question that was emailed in, but I just want to remind folks that you can ask your questions in the chat. I think that we do have a few more that we'll get to, but our next question comes from Maria. And Maria asks, what is being done with all the federal stimulus money that was sent to our state? Looks like particularly interested in the healthcare, public health area, but maybe some folks want to talk about what did happen to all those dollars.
Absolutely. I mean, there will be a lot of federal money used for our frontline workers. A lot of these dollars will be used to assist with childcare and stabilizing the industry. Funding was also used for the procurement of PPE. There have been so many planned investments in behavioral health to be funded with our federal resources. I think one thing that we are, tremendously proud of is the amount of funding that will be used for not just mental health, but healthcare in general, for early childhood resources. But behavioral health is a top priority. And I, in addition to federal funding, worked with our committee to ensure that we utilized a lot of our capital and operating dollars to go towards our behavioral health systems, including, helping our community members with substance abuse, helping our community members to re-enter society after their interactions with our behavioral health system, and making sure that they have services that they need for continued support. In fact, that was one of the bills that I worked on, providing sentencing alternatives for our community members who are struggling with their mental health. And so I feel confident that as those community members are working really hard to work through their mental health challenges, that these dollars, these federal dollars, but also our state dollars, will be used to assist them in that journey. And I will stop there, but I definitely feel excited about the investments in behavioral health and other needs in our community due to the increase of funding, a lot of it one-time funding, but the federal funding that made its way to our state.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Rep. Bronoske. I'll go right after you.
Oh, I was only going to speak for myself when it comes to, what specific federal dollars have gone to mental health. I mean, a pretty significant influx from the federal government, but it's all encompassing, right? I mean, mental health is a big part of so many of the things that we're dealing with right now because of, dealing with COVID and exacerbated other problems that we're seeing. I'm seeing questions pop up about, what are we doing to help address homelessness? What are we doing to help address the mental health of students who are dealing with not being in the classroom, friends, family, neighbors that have lost loved ones? So I think, this is where I'm excited to tie in some of the work that I'm proud of, that, a couple of the bills that I worked on this year that directly do tie to mental health. One, we're going to allow for emergency medical technicians to work in diversion centers. So when someone dealing with a substance use disorder or a mental health problem, instead of taking them, to jail or taking them to the emergency room, we'll take them to a diversion center where they get the necessary and most appropriate treatment that they need. We're also making sure that we're expanding apprenticeships for substance use disorder professionals. Again, mental health and substance use disorder, they can be mutually exclusive, but a lot of times they intermingle in ways that, we're doing a lot of research now and a lot of good work in the community to make sure that we address each and every single one of these issues when folks are suffering. So yeah, absolutely we're dealing with that. Absolutely, we're making state investments to expand community-based mental health treatment and moving away from the solely relying on the Western state model and bringing folks into the communities where they're from, where they have support of friends, family, loved ones, and making those investments into having resources in a diverse group of areas across the state. So yeah, absolutely, we're making those investments. So thank you for the question.
And we invested, one of our early action bills was $2.2 billion that was federal funding entirely, that gave $12 million for emergency cash assistance. We made sure that our small businesses had access to resources because they're the backbone of our economy and they are suffering, as well as their workers. We made sure that we invested in our school districts who needed to offset some of the losses that they were having. We made sure that we were taking a look at unemployment and underinsured folks and making sure that we had dollars for folks to apply and continue for longer extended periods of time as they need it. And then also making sure that we were, investing in COVID tracing and our public health, public health providers across our state and our public health departments across our state to focus on the cost of COVID overall. So that is where our early action $2.2 billion investments went in federal dollars. And then the additional dollars that we were fortunate to get, and if it weren't for those dollars, we really would have been in a world of hurt, continue to go in food banks and food assistance programs, both early on and throughout, in addition to continuing the working family tax credit and a host of other options that are both one-time and then allowing state dollars to go and be ongoing. So significant investments from federal dollars on COVID and on economic recovery.
Great, thank you. We have a question that came in the chat, but it was also emailed in. And so I think it's important that we ask this. And folks want to know if there's a plan to offer virtual access to testify or submit testimony in the future, since we've had this grand experiment that was a virtual session.
Well, I've heard our speaker, I can speak. I've heard our speaker say absolutely that she expects that we will continue allowing folks to go remote and for our chairs to work together to figure out how to make that happen. That was one of the highlights, I think, of the virtual session. And one of the things that went very well is we had more folks engaged in the process with us than ever before. The folks could sit in their living room and sign in to support a bill or oppose a bill without having to leave to drive anywhere, or they could testify from a distance. And I think that was a wonderful addition. Having been both in person and virtual, really saw the uptick of the involvement of citizens all across our state. So I know there's a commitment to figure out how to do it in the House, and I look forward to seeing that happen.
Yeah, agreed. And certainly when it comes to meeting with constituents also, I know I can speak for, my office. I plan on offering that up as an option. I mean, it is here and it works well for folks that have access to technology. I do want to say that I will welcome everyone that wants to come down to Olympia next session and meet me in person if we can do so safely. And I want you to experience the grandeur of the legislative building and enjoy Olympia as I have, growing up in our great state. And I want you to bring your kids. I want you to bring your family members. But if you can't take the day off work, if you can't take the day off school, hop onto a Zoom meeting. You'll get the full 15 minutes and we can chat about whatever you want to chat about. And I really look forward to having that as an option as well.
Great, thank you. We've got a question in the chat from Pam, and Pam says, I live in Lakewood and have noticed that there is an increased population of individuals without homes. What, if any, legislation has been addressed to get ahead of this challenge to ensure that everyone has housing and are not left to live on the streets?
Thank you. I can start there, and while I didn't focus significantly on housing bills this session, I was very supportive of my colleagues who did work on specific housing bills. And I heard a lot of conversations around affordability, density, making sure that we are removing arbitrary regulations to increasing housing in our community, and just making sure that we are thinking about the challenges of our unhoused community members and focusing on humanity and empathy and ensuring that we recognize that housing is a human right and everyone who chooses to be housed should be housed. And it is our responsibility to figure out how to provide more housing units. And, while sometimes that may mean, tax incentives for providing more accessible or affordable housing, it also should be, making sure in general that we are doing what we can to prevent a market that's going to continue to outprice our community members. I mean, it is tremendously hard to find even an affordable single unit studio. Purchasing a home is becoming even a greater challenge in our community. And so I applaud our legislators that focus, specifically on those housing options. And perhaps in the future, I'll have a specific bill that I get to champion, but I will continue to be supportive of legislation that is creating more housing, that is protecting tenants, that is supporting landlords, as we mentioned earlier, and that is, increasing density and paying attention to regulations that don't help us to increase housing in our community and build more houses for our community members.
And I'll jump in, serving on the housing committee. We invested, and I also serve on the capital budget committee, which has jurisdiction for the housing trust fund, and invested $175 million in the housing trust fund. We made sure that we worked on the multifamily tax exemption to allow local jurisdictions to continue to assist projects with infrastructure, both on the capital side and also in expanding access at all income levels. We were able to invest, I mentioned earlier, on rental assistance, because we want to, if we can keep people housed, then our folks the volume of folks who are homeless is reduced. And so making sure we're doing everything that we can from permanent supportive housing. We increased dollars in the Housing Essential Needs Fund, which is known as HEN. And then also made sure that we were acquiring property where we could on public lands and building property. And then also those who are existing projects like the Arlington Youth campus projects and investing in teen shelters and youth shelters and emergency shelters, and working with our local jurisdictions to give them incentive, and then also our builders and developers to give them incentive to continue to build. So we hit housing on a continuum from the most vulnerable to the missing middle housing that we know exists, and making sure that we're approaching it from a variety of different angles.
And if I can, just really briefly, I just wanted to thank especially Representative Leavitt as co-chair of the Pierce County delegation with that big investment for the Arlington Drive campus. I mean, it's not in our district per se, but it's absolutely going to benefit community members that are from our district and are across the county. So I just wanted to thank her and Senator Nobles and everyone else that took part in that Pierce County delegation to make sure that we address a more regional need when it comes to that specific issue. So thanks.
And I'll just jump in for one thing, because Ms. Bridges mentioned Lakewood. We also invested and expanded the program for college homeless and foster students. And so that will expand sites across where the need is, all across our state, and hopeful that will help particularly our homeless college students find a place where they can get wraparound services and housing and retain and finish and complete their degree.
Great, thank you. We have another question that was emailed in. We've got a few more questions that have come into the chat as well. So folks, keep getting those questions. We're going to try to power through and get to as many as we can. But this question has come into a lot of your inboxes. It says, this is from Angela, who's from Tacoma. Low Medicaid reimbursement rates and the COVID-19 pandemic has made it harder for nursing homes to remain open. What did you do this session to make sure nursing homes and the nurses who work there can continue to help our seniors? I know this is a question that's come up a lot. I think it was addressed in the budget. So I'll see, Rep. Leavitt, do you want to start off on this?
Sure. And Angela, thank you. And we have heard, thank you for the question. And we have heard that and Medicaid and Medicare rates, Medicaid rates in particular, have been awful. And I can use a lot of other adjectives on Medicaid rates across the board, and in particular nursing area. So we invested millions, both in terms of stabilization and increase in rates for Medicaid rates of nearly over $200 million. We also provided significant dollars, approximately $15 million for our supported living folks, and an increase in Medicaid rates for them as well. And so we heard loud and clear from our nursing care providers that we need to increase those rates, and they've been woefully low for a long time, and invested millions this session. Some of that is federal dollars, and it is going to end in December of 21. So we're going to have to do some more work, but both from a base rate perspective of increasing that base rate, and then also increasing the Medicaid rates, we believe will certainly start to make a dent in the ongoing challenge that we have on nursing rates overall.
Yeah, it's going to be a continuing challenge as our population continues to age and our aging population continues to increase. And that reimbursement rate is a key piece to retaining that critical workforce. We haven't had any nursing facilities that I'm aware of shut down in district, but if we don't have people that are willing to staff those facilities, it becomes a moot point, and those reimbursement rates need to also directly correlate with better pay and working conditions for our caregivers, whether they work at a nursing home, whether they provide in-home services. It's a critical piece of infrastructure that we can't continue to overlook, and it's going to continue to be a challenge moving forward. But thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Great. We actually have a couple of questions kind of in the area of behavioral health. And this one actually is specific to veterans. And this is from Richard. And I think Richard is actually watching right now. Our veterans have been suffering. What legislation did you support that considers our veterans? And I know that there was some work done in the budget on this, Rep. Leavitt. I know that you're very passionate about this issue. So I'll let you start first, and then we'll go around, because I'm sure everyone has some thoughts on this. Senator Nobles, maybe you can go second.
Yeah, the wonderful thing about Pierce County and the 20th Legislative District is we have a large veteran and military community, both active service members, retired veterans and their families, and very grateful to serve them. And we invested significantly on veteran suicide and behavioral health issues this session. There was a bill that didn't make through, but the investment was made in the budget in millions of dollars to provide that important assistance. I mentioned the National Guard age rates increase to allow National Guard members to continue their fine service was one of them. We had a bill that I supported on diversion from jail for our veterans, which is really important. We took a look at veterans housing. There was a project that didn't quite make it, but I'm hoping that we can continue to invest in veterans housing. And I've had many conversations with our Washington Department of Veterans Affairs about how we can expand that. We also did property tax exemption and eligibility expansion for our disabled veterans and our seniors to allow them to, especially during COVID, to use some of those dollars for healthcare costs. And so those were some of the things that we did this session. Because it was a condensed session in the terms of the amount of bills that we were able to offer, there's still a lot of work to do. We work closely with the Veterans Coalition, who really guide the work and talk about the important efforts that they want to see happen, and grateful for their feedback and input throughout each legislative process, and we'll continue to work hard with them. And then finally, we're working hard with our military spouses who do yeoman's work to boost up and support their active duty member, but they need opportunities for housing, quality childcare, and employment so that they can take care of their families as well. So those are some of the things, and we'll continue that work moving forward.
Thank you for this question. I know, for one, as a former military brat and former military spouse, I know the commitment and sacrifice made by our veterans. And so I do want to thank our veterans for their service and for giving so much of themselves. And I know that the House worked on some incredible bills, as Rep. Leavitt mentioned. And so I want to give them credit for that tremendous work. I do know that the Senate Democrats did put money back into the people's pockets through the Working Families Tax Credit. And this will provide unemployment relief for small businesses and a property tax exemption for service-connected disabled veterans, as well as seniors. The capital budget definitely is going to make investments in behavioral health. There's $201 million to build the new UW behavioral health teaching hospital, and $95 million to expand community-based behavioral health facilities. And we know that this includes serving our veteran community as they are going back to school or using these services for their families. And it was mentioned the importance of supporting the spouses of our active duty service members, as well as any of our veterans. But there's a long list of capital investments that have been made, everything from making sure that we are funding secure withdrawal management and stabilization, to investing in increasing Medicaid reimbursement rates. Again, all of these impact our veteran community as well. But the legislature, I believe, is definitely committed to finding resources and investing in resources in behavioral health for all of our residents across the state. And it's significantly important to us here in the 28th, considering we have a very large military community. So these investments directly benefit our veterans here in the 28th and across the state.
Yeah, and I was happy to see, a good bipartisan group of legislators support designating Washington State as a Purple Heart State in recognition of our service members who were wounded or killed in the line of duty in combat. And certainly, we are doing a better job also making sure that we steer veterans, especially when it comes to behavioral health, to the most appropriate facility. So what I mean by that is we are compelling health providers to inquire as to whether or not a veteran has a veteran status, so they can go to like the American VA in Seattle if that's a more appropriate means of mental health care. So continue to bring these kinds of issues to us. I know that the last bill that I mentioned wouldn't have happened if it wouldn't have been for good input within our state. So we're going to continue to make strides, and we are grateful for what they provide to our country and our community, and we're going to continue to do what we can to make sure that they're taken care of.
Great, thank you. The next question that we have is actually one that I missed, so I want to apologize to Susan. Susan asked, can you share your thoughts on how we continue to move forward and address issues around policing and racial equity? Who would like to take that one first?
Yeah, I mean, today was a big day around police accountability. The governor signed a dozen police accountability bills, including a bill that I sponsored, Senate Bill 5259, which will require a use of force database that will be managed by the state and subcontractor agencies. But, today was a tremendous day of in a demonstration of all the ways that I think our state wants to see change. And what I loved about all of the work around police accountability this session is the community really stepped up, not just one group. Like, this wasn't about the Black community or the Asian American community or our Native community. This was about community saying we need accountability and transparency as it relates to our law enforcement. And we saw tremendous bipartisan work on these bills this session. And I think the same is true as we talk about just racial unrest and systemic racism in this country. This legislature and the community worked tremendously hard to say this is a problem of every district of our state, of this country, and we do have to do something about it. And so you hear a lot of talk about fighting against racist systems. You hear a lot of talk and work through our bills around anti-racism and about equity, and how it is our responsibility as a community to tackle these very important issues, and how this sets us up better as we think about our future. So we have to have the conversations. The legislature had an opportunity to make it law that these issues and topics, the accountability, making sure that we see the humanity of everyone in our state is important, and also putting its money where its mouth is by making sure that we, put, millions and millions of dollars behind legislation to ensure that we do just what the legislature set out to do this session, which is meet the demands of the community to create change around systemic racism and around police accountability. And I think so many of those goals were achieved. And I love that earlier today, Mayor Woodard, as we were witnessing all of those bills signed in Tacoma earlier today, said, the goal is that we don't even have to pass this type of legislation, that we can stop having these conversations because, these systems of oppression don't exist. And, excessive use of force wouldn't exist, but that people simply wake up striving to do the right thing, being willing to do the right thing, yearning to do the right thing, because that is what's going to benefit our community. In the meantime, we pass great bills, and then we get to work implementing what's laid out in those bills.
All right, thank you. Well, we are actually almost out of time, so I'm going to make that our last question. However, sit tight if your question did not get answered. One, we're trying to answer questions in the chat, but also after we end, we're going to put up contact information for all of the legislators so you can reach out to their office directly and get answers to your questions. So stay on. Thank you to everyone who participated. I'm going to turn it back over to the legislators for some closing remarks. And what we'll do is we'll start with Representative Leavitt, and then we'll go to Representative Bronoske, and then end with Senator Noble. So Representative Leavitt.
Thank you again. It's been great to be with you, especially having you join us as this weather has gotten a little bit nicer, and really appreciate your questions on so many of the important topics and issues that are of top of mind in the 20th Legislative District and certainly across our state. We worked on a lot of different topics and issues. related to those focus areas that I mentioned, but we know that we have work to do. And with your help and with your input and feedback and telling us where we're off, which is a very important part of this process that we need to hear as well, that we can continue to serve you and do better on behalf of you and your family. So grateful to be with you. Look forward to hearing from you throughout the session. Happy to meet you at any point, whether virtually or as things go on and we get a little bit better vaccinated. Happy to meet with you in person at an outdoor setting in the 28th as well. And so grateful for you to be here. And we know we've got a lot of work still to do.
Rep. Bronoske.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here tonight. I know it's time away from friends and family, but this is important, and this is critically important for us to hear from you. And the conversation is going to have to continue. There's going to be a ton of work that we're going to continue to need to do that's going to benefit our district and our state overall. And you and your willingness to communicate and meet with us and chat with us about the things that you care about are critical to making sure that we live in a great community and a great state. So just like Rep. Leavitt, reach out. We can meet virtually. I'm more than happy to also meet in person if that's something you're comfortable doing. And let's continue to do good work. It is, again, the highest honor for me to serve you in this capacity, and I'm grateful to be here, and I will continue to do so on your behalf. So again, thank you so much, and please reach out.
And I too want to thank you all for your participation tonight, for coming and listening tonight. It really is a pleasure to serve our community, to receive your emails and understand, or at least try to understand, your questions or concerns. I think this is, a really exciting and tough job as a new legislator, but it is meaningful because I know how much the community cares, and it's meaningful to be a voice for community. But I do encourage you to continue communicating with us. Continue sharing what you see happening in our community, and continue being an advocate virtually, in person. Continue standing up for what is right in our community and what we want to see as a community here in the 28th. But just thank you for your support, whether we agree or disagree. Just thank you for caring and fighting really hard to see change. And I hope you all have a wonderful night.
That's all the time we have this evening. So thank you for attending today's event. And if we did not get to your question, we will post that member contact information afterwards, so you can contact the member offices directly. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.